I'm standing here in Skyrim Sea, wondering, can I find anything interesting deep in the sea? I've never really explored the sea before, so I figured, why not? A few of you mentioned in the comments that there might be some cool stuff to discover, so there was no way I wasn't going to check that out. The plan is to cover the whole sea with all islands, grab anything I can find, and then sell it all at the end to see how much gold I can make from this little underwater adventure. I'm starting way out east, near Windhelm, and heading all the way west. And let me tell you, exploring all of Skyrim Sea turned out to be both super time consuming and surprisingly fun. Of course, I've got a few mods running, some underwater plants, clearer water, and better swimming animations, because come on, it just looks way cooler that way. I also installed Sea of Spirits to fill the sea with creatures and make exploration even more exciting. But I didn't add any mods for extra loot or hidden treasures. I want to stick to what vanilla game has to offer. And for an underwater challenge like this, an Argonian sounds like the best choice, right? So meet Arnie. Here's his starting gear. Nothing fancy, just leftovers from our previous adventures. But hey, it might come in handy. So, ready to dive into Skyrim's underwater world with me? Let's go! I started by checking out a small island nearby. And right away, I found a little spot with some loot. Nothing too crazy, just a few barrels with salt pies, potion ingredients, and some ores. Still, better than nothing. I'll be showing you all the treasure locations on the map. On the other side of the island, things got a bit more interesting. I found a skeleton with a flag, and around it were a few gold ingots and an enchanted dagger. The skeleton itself didn't have anything special, but nearby I spotted a book called Beggar. I was really hoping it might explain what happened to this poor guy, but turns out the book wasn't related at all. Still, something did catch my eye. The last line said that the story continues in the book Thief, and honestly, I've never really paid attention to Skyrim's books, so it surprised me that they actually connect like that. Kinda cool. Anyway, nothing else showed up on that island, so it was time to head back into the water. And of course, right away I saw a bunch of Nordic barnacles. A lot of you mentioned in the comments that they're one of the most valuable items you can find in Skyrim's waters, along with salmon roe. And yep, you're totally right. When combined with garlic, they create the most expensive potion in the game. I could have made some serious gold just by collecting those ingredients, but I wanted to focus more on treasures connected to people, their stories, their leftovers. Plus, trying to collect every barnacle sounds like an impossible mission. Didn't take long before I ran into the first sea monsters. Arnie tried to keep his distance and was going pretty well, but of course a slaughterfish appeared from literally nowhere. And wow, there were a lot of them. A bit later, I made another discovery. 2 skeletons floating in the water. They didn't have anything interesting to loot, but I'm still counting them as a treasure in this video. Just nearby, I noticed a small boat flipped upside down. Looks like it might have belonged to them. But what happened? A little further ahead, I spotted a bit of land with a small camp. Technically not an island, but it felt connected to the whole situation, so I decided to check it out. Arnie had to fight off a few wolves first, but then we got to explore. And yep, I found a journal. Exactly what I was hoping for. Turns out 2 guys, Skagger and Advart, came out here to drink and relax. But they also tried fishing, and the journal mentions the fish were biting and that their boat was taking on water. I can confirm, the fish do bite here. The slaughterfish group that attacked me was actually just nearby. So yeah, if the guys were already drunk and the boat started sinking, those fish probably finished the job. Pretty sad, especially since Advart wrote he was planning to head home the next day if they didn't catch anything. Okay, so technically it's not an island, so maybe I shouldn't have taken anything from there. But since the skeletons were part of the find and the camp clearly belonged to them, I think Arnie was totally justified. Nothing super valuable, mostly food, and of course a lot of alcohol. Oh, and Arnie noticed something else, a fishing spot. Since his last adventure was all about being a fisherman, he got curious and tried it out. First, he caught 2 juvenile mud crabs. Then he discovered a completely new fish, Arctic grayling. Later on, while swimming, we even saw them in the water. That was it for the day. The sun started going down and the water got too dark to see anything. Arnie started feeling a bit uneasy, especially after spotting something huge in the distance, a whale. After reading about the 2 poor guys earlier, Arnie decided it was safer to call it a day. He found a tiny island to camp on, lit a fire, and warmed up after that freezing swim. The sky was amazing that night. Arnie sat by the fire, ate some salmon, and drank a bit of Nord meat to honor Skagger and advert. Then he went to sleep with the sounds of the waves and the neon route. So yeah, that was day 1. Only one small part of the sea explored, but already so much going on. The next day, Arnie got up as soon as the sun started to rise. There was still so much sea and so many little islands left to explore, and he wasn't planning on wasting any daylight. The weather was actually pretty nice, so he spent a lot of time swimming, checking every corner, circling around glaciers, and wandering around the different islands. Unfortunately, nothing too exciting showed up in that area. Just a source of orichalcum ore. But of course no pickaxe, so he couldn't even mine it. Not too far from there is the Chill, Winterhold's icy little jail cave. While exploring the waters nearby, Arnie noticed some movement in the distance. And yep, it was a shark. Thankfully, Arnie spotted it just in time to keep a safe distance. Later on, he ended up running into even more sharks. Arnie checked out a bunch of different spots, including the island with the College of Winterhold. When he tried swimming through a narrow passage there, a snowstorm suddenly rolled in. Visibility underwater dropped drastically. There was plenty of land around though, so Arnie decided to set up camp and call it a day. No point in risking it and missing some hidden treasure just because of bad weather. The next day wasn't exactly sunny, but the visibility was much better. And guess what? Arnie had actually camped near something pretty cool. A wrecked ship. This was exactly what he'd been hoping to find out here on the sea. The only problem was that the shipwreck was right next to a bandit camp. So yeah, he had to deal with them first. But hey, in that case, he could also take their stuff, right? Arnie checked out the camp and found a bunch of things. A fishing map, a chest full of potions, a shiny ring, plenty of armor, and even this cute little backpack. He had to try it on, of course, just to see how it looked. After that, he went to check out the wrecked ship. There was a chest with a journal inside, but when Arnie started reading it, he came across the words Argonian invasion force, and it really hit him hard. He didn't want to dig any deeper into that. He was a good guy, and the last thing he needed was to know about some brutal past involving his race. He had no idea Argonians made an invasion on Morrowind back in the day. Pretty heavy stuff. On the upper part of the ship, Arnie found a few more things to take, including another chest with some loot, but nothing super exciting this time. While exploring the island, he also found a spot to fish. Besides the usual Arctic grayling, he actually caught something pretty weird. Angler larvae. Looks a little strange, right? Later, Arnie had to head back east since there was still some area he hadn't checked out. He came across some interesting places like this little camp, but since it was on solid land, he left the loot behind. Not too long after that, he spotted some standing stones. By then, it was getting pretty dark, so he decided to head back to the bandit camp and call it a night. And with that, Arnie had managed to search this area in 3 days. The next day, Arnie quickly stumbled upon something interesting, a cave with Septimus Cygnus. The place is connected to the main quest, so it's not exactly a huge discovery. Of course, I didn't take anything, since that would be stealing, and Arnie is a good guy. It would have been nice to find more glaciers with caves full of treasures though. The area Arnie was exploring was super deep, and because of that, he saw a lot of whales swimming around. Pretty cool, right? Then came the big find of the day. A huge wrecked ship at the bottom of the sea, along with some smaller ones too. Sadly, the loot was a bit of a letdown. Mostly ingredients, clothes, and 2 chests. And at least one of them had this amulet, so that was something. He checked out the smaller ships too, but there was nothing to take. Just when he was about to leave, he spotted a coffin. That's where he found a ring with a fancy design. Inside, there was also a note with the last words of Master Elaine. Right nearby, but not underwater, Arnie found a camp and land. There was a skeleton along with a sad note. Turns out the note was from a guy who had been waiting for his love, Shelley. Unfortunately, it looked like he died here, waiting for her to come back. Arnie couldn't help but wonder, could Shelley have been one of the people on those ships he just explored? It really hit him hard. So in memory of the couple, Arnie made a little toast. It was an emotional moment. The adventure had its thrills, but finding out about all these sad stories was heartbreaking. Not far from there, Arnie found another fishing spot. Unfortunately, no new fish species to discover this time. But a little further on, he spotted something cool. Pearlfish just swimming around in the shallow water. It was like nothing he'd ever seen before. Later, Arnie found 2 places with statues. The second one was more interesting. He discovered the body of an Argonian. As far as I know, it's one of the missing students from the College of Winterhold. Looks like the Argonian had been doing some kind of experiment, but things didn't go well and this was the result. Arnie searched the place and grabbed everything he could find. As he kept exploring the sea, he came across a few more interesting things. Angler larvae in their natural habitat, a crew member's body floating floating in the water, which of course counts as a treasure, and these weird flying torches. By the time it was getting dark, Arnie found an island where he could set up camp. And of course, he found one last treasure of the day, a skeleton with a chest. The loot wasn't great though, and unfortunately, he couldn't figure out what happened to the poor guy. The book wasn't a journal, and he couldn't search the skeleton. After setting up camp, Arnie ate a warm meal and just stared at the stars, thinking about all the sad stories he had come across during his adventure. He was thankful to be okay, but wow, what a tough day. Arnie got up early as usual. Right next to his camp, there was another island to check out. I found Engvild Cave with Droger and ghosts. Didn't take any loot though, it's a pretty big place to explore. The island itself was interesting and Arnie noticed something odd in the distance. When he approached, he was horrified by what he found. Next to the body, he found a spell tome, Flame Cloak. It looked like yet another tragic story, maybe someone who messed up an incantation and paid the price. If I remember correctly, Yisra is a missing student from Winterhold College. I'm curious though, why she has her hands like that? Aside from the spell tome, I found a necklace and some gold. I probably shouldn't have taken any of it. After all, it wasn't an island. But a bit earlier, I decided to skip the big cave, so let's call it an event raid. Next, Arnie found a camp on another island, this time with an Argonian. Looked like he'd stumbled across a lot of treasure, which wasn't a surprise. I could already see a wrecked ship in the water. The Argonian wasn't exactly the friendliest guy though.
It should be embarrassed to be uncovered so.
The ship was incredible, sitting at the bottom of the sea. As I thought, Arnie found some sapphires and rubies, but aside from that, just one chest with the usual stuff. Oh, and he spotted a fish he'd never seen before, Arctic char. Arnie figured he'd give it a shot, so he tried fishing near the Argonian's camp and sure enough caught a few. On the next island, Arnie found some gold ore, but also noticed something interesting in the distance, a tent. Now, it wasn't just any tent, it was something special. Arnie took a closer look and he was completely fascinated by what he saw. I'd heard about that lover's tent once, but this was the first time I actually saw it. Had no idea it was here. Of course, Arnie didn't take anything from the tent. It wasn't on an island and he also wanted to be a gentleman. Someone had put a lot of effort into setting it up. Later on, Arnie spotted a door to the Old Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. He tried to open it.
What is life's greatest illusion?
But just after seeing the lover's tent, he answered the door's question by saying, "The biggest illusion in life is being happily married." The door didn't budge, which gave Arnie an idea. The rest of the day was spent swimming around the area, checking out the water and glaciers, but nothing particularly exciting came up. By the time it got dark, Arnie decided to spend the night at the Dawnstar Inn. It was way more comfortable than setting up camp again. He rented a room, but it wasn't exactly perfect. The room didn't have a door. How's he supposed to sleep with all that noise coming from the tavern? And as if that wasn't enough, some lady just walked right in, sat down and started drinking in his room. How rude, right? After she left, Arnie felt better. He ate some supper, drank some wine and went to sleep. The day started off nice. Arnie was eager to explore more of the sea and this time something really weird caught his eye in the distance. It looked like a crabman. Now, as far as I know, that's called a drag and trust me, those things are dangerous. Later, Arnie decided to check the coastline just out of curiosity and found this cozy little fisherman's shack. It was pretty nice. Of course, I didn't take anything, wasn't on an island after all. As Arnie moved further, he had to deal with wolves and the cold snow. It was wild how fast the weather changed. In the sand, he found a wrecked boat with some loot. It definitely felt like water treasure to me, like the boat had been brought here by the waves and crashed. So naturally, Arnie took everything. The snowstorm was so heavy that Arnie decided to spend the rest of the day in the shack. There was no point in trying to see anything in that weather, especially out deep in the sea. He spent his time fishing a bit, cooked up some warming soup and ate it. Then, while looking around, he found Tolif's journal. It turns out one day a wizard showed up at Tolif's door asking if he could stay for a while. The wizard offered potions and fire swords in return, so Tolif agreed. But let's just say that wasn't the best decision. soon. The wizard started casting spells on mud crabs, and because of it, Tolif couldn't sell any of them anymore. The wizard said he could have them once he was done, but by then, the mud crabs had this awful smell. One night, a mud crab actually tried to attack Tolif. That's when he decided enough was enough and asked the wizard to leave. The wizard though refused, claiming that now it was his place. So Tolif had no choice but to leave, discovering that the wizard was messing with some seriously dark magic. He left for good and headed to the Wind Peak Inn. I'm curious if I could find him there. The whole thing really spooked Arnie. He was so freaked out that he didn't want to sleep in that shack anymore, but he was exhausted. Eventually, he just passed out. Luckily, nothing happened. Still, he has no interest in ever coming back here. That place is off the list for good. The next day looked a lot better. It started off great with the wrecked ship clearly visible on the horizon. Arnie wasted no time and swam out to check it out. This ship, by the way, was actually the one that gave him the idea for this whole adventure. He'd seen it before while living as a fisherman, and that's when the spark hit. On the upper deck, he found a spot with a chandelier. Pretty fancy for a wrecked ship. He took everything he could find and headed below deck. To his surprise, it was in pretty good shape. There was even some old furniture and signs that showed people had once lived on the ship. He found a space with beds, which was pretty cool. And in the drawer, he found a backpack, might come in handy later. Other than that, he found a bunch of random things, but nothing too exciting. He checked the cargo hold too, but again, nothing really caught his attention. Back in the water, Arnie spotted a chest at the bottom of the sea, not far from the ship. First discovery like that. I started wondering if there were more chests just lying on the seafloor. It was the first one I'd found. The chest had an expert lock, and inside I found a flawed Varla stone. Finally, something different from the usual stuff I'd been picking up. Of course, I was hoping for some unique weapon or something you can't find anywhere else in Skyrim. After those lucky finds, the rest of the day was mostly just swimming around. Arnie saw a few more dregs. He explored a wide stretch of open water, glaciers and islands, but didn't find anything else that day. As it started getting really dark, Arnie found a spot to settle in for the night. He lit a fire and sat there, watching the sky. He thought about using his tent, but that's when he realized he completely forgot to grab it from the last place he stayed. The last 2 nights had been at the fisherman's shack and Don't Star Inn, so he hadn't noticed it was missing until now. With no other option, he stood by the fire on the sand. Not ideal, but hey, at least fire kept him warm. Next day, Arnie was swimming a lot. The sea is so vast and so hard to explore and check every corner. At the beginning, I couldn't find any loot, just some interesting places like the skeleton with that strange pose on the island and the entrance to the cave along the coastline. That day, Arnie had really bad luck as someone wanted to get rid of him. It was an assassin and he had a letter from the Dark Brotherhood. When Arnie read it, he was terrified. He left the body untouched and left the place quickly. I checked another big area of the sea and even an island near Volkihor Castle. And only at the end of the day, I found a wrecked ship with a bandit camp. After dealing with the bandits, Arnie looted the whole place. I had to finally wear one of the backpacks I had in the inventory. Decided to take the hunter's backpack. I checked the upper part of the ship, nothing interesting. The lower parts were underwater, but also nothing interesting. Even the skeleton and the chest at the bottom had a boring drop. Arnie decided to spend the night here at the bandits' camp, as he didn't have his own tent. Of course, he checked the fishing spots, but didn't catch anything new. Arnie ate a meal, warmed himself up with wine, and went to the tent to rest. Tomorrow, he should be able to explore the last part of the sea. That day, Arnie came across a few more interesting spots along the coastline. Another cave entrance, Northwatch Keep, the little boat that takes you to Castle Volkihar, and even a cozy-looking camp. He checked out the last big section of the sea up to the line where the castle sits, but nothing. The water near the castle was super shallow at first, but the closer I got, the deeper it became. So all that was left was to swim around the island with the castle. Honestly, I didn't expect to find anything there. I figured it would just be empty water. But to my surprise, there was a wrecked ship. This one wasn't even marked on the map like the others. Sadly, it only had one chest. Above the wreck, there were a few more ruined ships and boats floating around, but not a single item to take. It turned out to be the last interesting place on this whole journey. The castle sits on its own island, and yeah, maybe I should have looted the whole place, but let's be real, that probably wouldn't end well. So Arnie returned to the cozy camp he'd found earlier fire, opened a bottle of Nord meat, and raised a toast to finishing the challenge. Finally, it was time to sell all the loot. I headed back to Whiterun and sold everything to Adrian, Arcadia, and Belethor. After all that, my inventory looked pretty much the same as when I started. I did keep the new backpack though, it had more carry weight than the old one. Oh, and I kept the fishing map too. Arnie wanted to keep it as a little memento. There were a few quest-related items I couldn't sell, like a letter, a book, and a ring. And one more special thing, but I'll get to that in a bit. I started with 1,831 gold. Most of it came from selling fish and other stuff I caught in the river at the market. The rest of the money came from the mentor's ring and an iron helmet that I sold to merchants in Whiterun. This time, after selling everything I found during the sea adventure, I ended up with 4,036 gold. Not great, considering how long this whole journey took and how dangerous it was. Arnie risked his life for that amount. So in summary, Arnie ended up with 5,867 gold. This time though, he didn't want to blow it all at the taverns. He made a big decision, buy a house in Whiterun. He didn't have enough gold to buy all the upgrades, especially since there was something else he needed to buy. So he traveled to Solitude, picked up some fine clothes, and made his way to the docks in Windhelm. And now I can finally tell you about that one extra thing he had in his inventory. The amulet of Mara. Yeah, I know I said Arnie didn't take anything from the lover's tent, but he actually did take one thing, the amulet. He'd already been thinking about the marriage, and when he stood in front of the Dark Brotherhood door and said that the life's greatest illusion is being happily married and nothing happened, that's when he knew for sure. Love wasn't an illusion, not to him. He'd been thinking about someone ever since the river exploration. He'd seen her working at the tanning rack from the water. He thought about her while trying to make it as a fisherman. Through all the shipwrecks and danger, he kept remembering her. After finding out about so many tragic stories out at sea, Arnie realized life's too short. So he put on the amulet and proposed.
Is that Lady Mara's amulet? I'm shocked a fine person like you isn't married already. You have a kind heart. I'd be honored to walk by your side until the trees themselves fade away if you would have me. As short as life can be in this land, we will have each other.
Arnie was over the moon. He rushed to Riften to arrange the wedding. The city looked beautiful. Colorful lanterns hanging everywhere, little snowflakes drifting down, and the sun shining through. Arnie looked so sharp in his fancy clothes. He was so excited. The ceremony was short but sweet. Arnie couldn't take his eyes off his love.
Do you agree to be bound together in love, now and forever?
I do. Now and forever.
Do you agree to be bound together in love, now and forever? Under the authority of Mara, the divine of love, I declare this couple to be wed. I present the two of you with these matching rings, blessed by Mara's divine grace. May they protect each of you in your new life together.
After the wedding, they spent their first night in the lover's tent and then headed to their new home in Whiterun. Arnie was just so happy that Shavi wouldn't have to freeze in Windhelm anymore. The house might not be the most luxurious one, but they had each other. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered.